Hey, I've learned something over a lot of years of pastoring, and that is if the Lord gives me a message, and then a week later He gives me another message, and it's connected to that message, He's trying to get somebody's attention. Just wanted you to know that ahead of time. This week I want to talk to you about a subject called we can grow bitter or we can grow better. Listen to me. There was Dr. Jim Moore was a pastor in St. Luke's United Methodist Church in Houston, who years ago wrote a book entitled You Can Grow Bitter or You Can Grow Better. He writes that he got the idea of that book from a young lady who once came to him, and she was probably in one of the most tragic places in her life. She was in tears, her knuckles were white from gripping the twisted handkerchief in her hand. She had just received word that her 26-year-old husband had been killed in a farming accident, leaving her alone with 3 preschool children, school-aged children. One moment he was alive and vibrant and there, and the next moment he was gone. She said to Dr. Moore, I don't know how I'm going to be able to get along without him, but I do know one thing. I can either get bitter or I can get better. Boy, I know something today. There's a lot of people who come to church week after week, month after month, carrying around hurt, pain, bitterness, anguish in their hearts. Acts chapter 8, verse 23 has a unique verse. You don't think about it a lot of time when you're reading it, you just pass through it. But chapter 8, verse 23 says, For I see that you are poisoned by bitterness. Woo, that's strong right there. Poisoned by bitterness and bound by iniquity. Boy, that's something that's probably more true than we'd like to believe. That people who are sitting close by you, people in your family, are poisoned this morning by bitterness. It's eating them up, tearing them up, almost killing them by moment by moment. I've learned something. For many people, life can be a painful thing. I don't know, how many of you ever watched the movie Forrest Gump? Y'all seen that movie? There's one particular scene where Forrest has had this lifetime friendship with a young girl by the name of Jenny. Jenny grew up in a troubled home. She left home. She ran away, joined the hippie movement, drug culture. She was just messed up. Even then had a boyfriend who treated her terrible and beat her and things like that. In this one scene, both Forrest Gump and Jenny have grown up. She is now beginning to retreat from her lifestyle of sex and drugs, and they're walking down this dirt road. And in the movie, they come up on this old shack, and it happened to be the house where Jenny had been raised. When she sees it, her face kind of contorts. You can see the hurt and the pain and the anguish in her eyes where she was remembering what had gone on. She reached down, she picked up a stone with all of her might. She threw that rock at the house, and it knocked off a little chip of paint of the already battered house. She reached down, she picked another one up, she threw it and busted a window that was already half busted out. And then all of a sudden, she just picked up rock after rock after rock, and she threw the rocks at the house, threw the rocks at the house, threw the rocks at the house, until finally she's exhausted. And she just plummets to the ground. She's broken. She's hurt. She is just devastated. And Forrest Gump walks over to her and looks down at her and says, I guess sometimes there just aren't enough rocks. You know, what he said was more than he probably knew in the scene of that movie. Surely she could have thrown stones all day long at that house and never destroyed that old shack of a house. That was obvious, I think, in the movie. But what was not so obvious was the deeper meaning of that scene. Throwing stones all day could have never abolished the abuse or the effects that it had on her life. In fact, throwing stones would have never brought back or bring back the torment or the agony or the misery or anguish that day. And we've all been there. I wouldn't ask you to raise your hand, but I'm almost positive there are people sitting here right now whose childhood, whose life has been destroyed by things people have said, done, whatever, and yet they're dealing with that anguish and that bitterness and that pain. We've all thrown stones. We didn't know it. Like Jenny, we were throwing them at our past, at situations, at people, at memories even. And it never relieves the agony or destroys the misery or lessens our anguish. It never, like last week I talked about it never eases our pain and our torment. So Jenny's question is kind of ours today. And that is, when throwing stones won't cut it, what do we do? What do we do when we run out of stones to throw and we plummet to the ground in despair? I know as a pastor of many years now, I've talked with a lot of people who have many kinds of problems. I'm telling you, you wouldn't believe the stories that I could tell you over the years that I've talked with people whose lives have been ruined. But the problem that probably is most shared among me, at least me in my experience, is disappointment. People are disappointed. It's a feeling that life has treated them unfairly. I've been there. I can understand that. Their hopes, their promises have not been realized, and they grow old and realize that life has passed them by, so to speak. They're frustrated, and almost always, they're angry and bitter. And their bitter experiences have led them to be deeply resentful both of life and mostly of people. I found that one of the most effective ways that you can help somebody who is in that state, you may not even know it, but you help them to realize this important point. Everyone's life is filled with disappointments, disillusionments, and even difficulties. There's not a person in here who would probably could raise their hand and say, I've never had a problem. You'd either be lying or I'd question it. I've never been hurt. I've never been disillusioned. I've never been disappointed. I can tell you, I've been all three of those a lot of times. The old cliche says life is not fair, but we want it to be. We want life to be fair, but it's not. No matter who you are, no matter what your situation in life may be, life is tough. Life is difficult. You can't escape the problems. They go right along with us, walking almost in our footsteps every day. Norman Vincent Peale, maybe said it best. He said the only people without problems are in cemeteries. And that may be true. So what is the answer? How do we get through this very rugged part of our lives? How do we get through bitter experience and disappointments? I can tell you, not only in this church, but in almost every place I've ever pastored, run revivals, people would come up to me and talk to me, and they would tell me how disappointed they were in life, how they had been hurt or abused or in some way disillusioned with life, and they didn't know how to get beyond it. So what is the answer? How do we do that? I think it's in the way that we solve problems. Maybe maneuver through problems might be a better word. Of bitter experiences that makes us come out of it, a situation, better or bitter. Pastor, how do you know about it? I spent 10 years in that bitter prison. And I never got better until some things changed in my life. Nothing changed with what happened to me, but it changed in my life. How happy we are depends on not how successful we are, but how successful we solve or maneuver or work through the problems that we have. Once we realize that, then we, all of a sudden, like in my case, you quit blaming other people. They still did it, they were still wrong, but I quit blaming them. All of a sudden, I got beyond that because I began to realize it was how I solved that problem that was the key to my success. How I'd be happy again. And I'm going to tell you, for 10 years, I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy at all. My life was a miserable mess. A second kind of person I see is people who are disillusioned. What do you mean by that? Well, a person who's lost their dreams. They don't have any more tomorrows to think about. It's difficult to live without a dream. In fact, the one thing I see when I often visit nursing homes is that I see people that have no more dreams. Their faces are sad. Their life is miserable. And I think of the shattered dreams of those elderly people who once had hope for tomorrow, who once decided they could change the world. And so they think their shattered dreams is just all but gone. And the result is a lot of anger and bitterness of what life has done to them. Some of them may not show it, but most of them do. And they have a lot of resentment. Now listen to me this morning. We have a right, we may think we have a right to bitterness and resentment. But can we afford the cost of it? Because the cost is crazy. What it does to us, our families, and those around us is way too expensive. So what do we do? I'm glad you asked that question. That's why I'm here today. One feeling is that you keep your attitude under control. What do you mean by that? Keeping your attitude under control will always be a deliberate act. You will absolutely have to take control of it. You can't let it run wild. You can't let it get out. You've got to take control of it. What do you mean by that, Pastor? We may not have control over our circumstances. I can't control what somebody does to me. I can't control what other people do. I can't control certain circumstances that happen to me, but I can control my attitude towards those circumstances. I can live in bitterness, or I can move to a better place. I can wallow in the mire and the self-pity of realizing somebody shouldn't have done that to me. They shouldn't have been that way. They should not have done it. And I can get mad and I can get angry, but it doesn't do me any good. The cost of it is crazy bad. Or I can choose not to let my attitude run wild. You see, the attitude with which we face life circumstances is totally our own choice. Oh, but Pastor, you don't know what's been done to me. You can't help what's been done to you. But you can help how you respond to that, how your attitude is towards that. One of the greatest verses, in my opinion, in the Bible is found in John 16:33. Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he speaks to his disciples, and he says, "Be of good cheer, I have overcome the world." Now, they may have not known the extent of that at the moment, but on the surface, it may have looked okay, but in the small future that was coming, we see what happened. Jesus is facing beatings, scourgings, humiliation, rejection by the very ones he was talking to. His disciples didn't realize that, worst of all, he was about to go to the cross. I mean, this is a bad day. And yet in the face of all of this, he says, good cheer. Have good cheer. Be of good cheer. And I got to tell you, when I'm going through something, that's the last thing I want somebody to say to me. Be of good cheer. I'll knock you out. Be of good cheer. I don't want to be of good cheer. There were days that somebody would say to me, boy, things are going to get better. And I'd be like, don't tell me that. I was hurt and angry. But this tells me that the real battle Jesus is talking about is the attitude of our lives towards the events that's about to take place or are taking place or has taken place. And we need to take control of our attitude. That's on you today. I like to, that's a new phrase. I guess maybe it ain't so new. I'm old. But it's on you. God is saying, I've done my part. This is on you. You take control of your attitude. You take control of how you face a certain situation. Second thing, I preached a long time the last few weeks, so I thought I'd cut you a break. You can bring your sleeping bag. No. Second thing is, remind yourself that bitterness and resentment are wrong for you. Oh, but you don't know what they've done to me. Still wrong. Humanity, I learned this one time, humanity is made in the image of God. I get mad when I see people committing violent crimes against other people. I'm like, boy, I'd take a baseball bat. Well, that's God's creation. And then you go, well, I got to be good. Boy, it's kind of hard when those thoughts are banging around inside of your brain. When you accepted Christ, the thing is, into your life, you were restored to the birthright. And when I'm thinking about how bad people are and have been to me or been to other people, I forget sometimes how bad I was. I forget how bad I was. And the thing about that is, you reclaim when you come to Christ your heritage in God. Negative thinking is destructive to your divine image. When I think bad about other people, I've got to realize they're in sin. They're living out their sinful life. If they knew Jesus, they wouldn't do that. So, well, preacher, we can't make them all Christians. I understand that. But I can control what I think if I recognize they're made in the image of God. I don't care how bad they are, how much of a loser they are, they're in the image of God. I was a guard in a jail for a little while, and I worked in Fayette County, and there was a young man in there, and he was tough rocks, boy. He hit a guard, broke his jaw. He was tough. And he happened to be in the pod where I was at, and these were open pods. You didn't get to go stay behind closed doors or windows. You were out there with them. And somebody told me, said, you know you got that guy in your pod, and said, he will hurt you if he gets a chance. So one day I started talking to him. I found out his daddy was a preacher in the Church of God of, I can't think of the name of the congregation now, the church, but it was a Pentecostal group. I said, wow, and I'm a Pentecostal preacher. So we got to talking. And one day his family was going to, they were going to get on the computer, and they were going to wave to him and speak to him. They hadn't seen him in months. And He said, I can't see them because I don't have a computer. I said, what about if I let you do it on my computer? They couldn't come behind a certain line like that line was going to hold them out. But anyway, I said, I'll turn the computer where you can see it. He said, boy, that'd be awesome. So I pulled it up. It was my shift to work. It was on a Sunday. And I pulled it up, and I turned it on, and he came over there. And I turned it to where he could see it, not violate that trust. He began to watch it. They waved at him, talked to him. And this tough, mean kid, I looked up and tears were running down his cheek. And I talked to him about the Lord. Let him watch that. Boy, he became my right hand. They one of those kids who could step out of line. He was like, you ain't going to be that way to my preacher. Don't kill him now. Just let him go. And you realize then that they are in the image of God. They're good people. They just have lived a wrong life. And so when you do that, the truth is that certain people in situations literally can be a pain if you let them. But when that happens, a variety of problems can occur. When we come against the image of God, when we come against this bitterness and all that we allow in our lives, it hurts us both physically and spiritually. There was a man whose health was really good. I mean, he was top-notch. He was okay. He was sturdy. He was strong. His heart was good. His blood pressure was good. And then all of a sudden his father died. And when his father died, he and his sister got into a kind of prolonged legal dispute that lasted for a long time about their father's will. The court case finally went to court, and the sister won. And the brother became so angry. He talked about it. He thought about it. He filled himself with it. He became obsessed with it. You kind of know how that is. And he grew to hate his sister more and more. Then he began to have difficulties. Heart started to be bad. Blood pressure started. Kidneys bothered him. And before long, after many months of complications, he actually died. It seems obvious that he died from bodily injuries brought on by this powerful emotions of hating his sister. In fact, it's almost like he killed himself, death by bitterness. He committed spiritual suicide, and the trigger he pulled was a trigger of bitterness. You can't afford to live with bitterness. You can't afford to live with it as it eats away at your life. And so what do you do about that? Well, you simply forgive. Oh, but Pastor, you don't know. You know, that seems to be the resounding question. You don't know what I've gone through. You don't know what somebody's done to me. You don't know what, and that's true. We may not know, but God knows, and you have to forgive. Someone wrote these words I thought were outstanding. To forgive is to set a prisoner free, only to find out that prisoner was you. Jesus was talking one day in Matthew, and he wrote and said these words. So if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there you remember that your brother has something against you, then leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. There's something to that. He's basically saying, you got to get things right. Let me tell you something. Here's my little code. This will never be right. God, you will never be right until this is right. You notice it forms the shape of a cross? This will never be right until this is right. So I can't harbor feelings. I can't hate. I can't not forgive because that disrupts this. It keeps it on the wrong level. So God is telling you, you've got to forgive. If anyone had the right to bitterness, had to be Jesus. I mean, good Lord, he's hanging on a cross. But even in his most painful moment, he rejected bitterness and said to the Father, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Wait a minute, they're killing you. They're crowning you with thorns. They're spearing you in the side. And yet he says, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. You may say, but they very well knew what they were doing, and they did. That's why I can't forgive them. Somebody hurt me. Somebody did me wrong. Song. The answer is still that you have to forgive them. That's right. I don't want to forgive. That's what I tell Teresa. I don't want to forgive them. You got to forgive them. I don't want to forgive them. I mean, I wasn't being funny. I was being honest. I don't want to forgive them. They hurt me. They hurt me. I don't want to. They caused me trouble. But I kept going down this spiral until the day that I honestly forgave them. That's what God's trying to say to you today. That you have to forgive them. And the answer is that until you forgive them, you're never going to heal. You're never going to get better. Fourthly, know that forgiveness always includes, have we got it up on the screen? Forgetting. That's a hard part. Not only do I have to forgive them, but I think to really forgive them, I have to forget it. I have people all the time tell me, well, I'll forgive them, but I'm not forgetting. And you probably hadn't forgiven them. I'm just being honest. Well, I'm gonna forgive them, but I can't ever forget. Then you'll never get healed. You'll live with it. I read of a man who had a lot of struggles in his life. One day there was a conflict that arose and someone shot and killed this man's brother. And the whole family was sad, of course. And they grieved a lot about this very sudden and unfortunate death and loss of this brother. The man initially said, I'm forgiving the man that killed the brother, but after a while, he just couldn't seem to process it. Finally, God helped him process the tragedy and forgive the murderer. Here's the neat part of that story. For years, this man had a prayer list. And on it, he had his brother's name, and he had prayed for his brother every day. When his brother was killed, after a while, he kind of just grew to the place he knew he needed to forgive this guy. So he erased his brother's name off the list. And in the place of it, he put the man who murdered him, put his name in. And every day, he prayed for them. It's kind of hard to pray for somebody and not forgive them, or pray for them and hold them accountable. That, to me, is real forgiveness. Not the kind that just says it, but the kind that reacts on it. Clara Barton once wrote and said about a cruel thing that had been done to her, and she said, I distinctly remember forgetting about that. That's kind of taking your own bull by the horn. I distinctly remember forgetting about that. So if bitterness is never put to rest, it stays there to drain us and to limit us and to cripple us from going about our lives. Lastly, remind yourself that you do not have any right to revenge. But I want to hurt them. They hurt me. I want to hurt them. I think this is probably the one thing that I've had to wrestle with in my life more than any one thing. When I see the wrongs that are committed towards innocent children or even adults, People that can't defend themselves, I'm quick to want to defend them myself. When I was a little boy, I used to put a little boy on the bus. He was crippled. He walked with crutches, and I'd pick George up and put him on the bus every morning. And I watched over him like a hawk. If you mess with him, I would knock you out. I didn't let anybody hurt him. I hated injustice. Booker T. Washington once wrote, "No man shall ever narrow or degrade my soul by making me hate him." Hate is a powerful thing. Hate does more to somebody. It's like drinking poison and hoping it kills somebody else. It's a terrible thing. So there's a verse in Hebrews, chapter 4, 12, 14, and 15 verses. Listen to this. Strive for peace with everyone, and the holiness without which none of us, no one, will see the Lord. This part of the verse, I've read this part, but all of a sudden, this part of the verse just kind of jumped out like it was neon lights. It says this: "See to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God." I'm like, oh, don't say that. That tells me no matter who's wronged me, they deserve grace. No matter how they've hurt me, they deserve grace. Oh, no, they don't deserve grace. Wait. We deserve grace. God gave us grace. And then he goes on to say that no root of bitterness springs up and causes trouble, and by it many become defiled. So the consequences is, if I hate somebody and I won't forgive them, then there's a problem with that, because I'm saying I want grace, but they're not worth grace. And he says because of that, there's a root of bitterness will spring up. Listen, the people that are struggling, a lot of people in adulthood are struggling because what happened to them as a child, a young person, a teenager, has so affected them that they hated the person that did it to them. They hated the abuse. They hated it. And they're like, I'm never forgiving them. And God's saying, but you have grace. They deserve grace. Grace doesn't mean I have to like what they've done. Grace don't even mean I have to approve what they've done. But grace means I have to offer them that forgiveness. When we seek revenge, we can never be satisfied. And I'm like that. Well, it was so funny. As I ate breakfast with some guys, and of course they're not all believers. One of them asked me the other day, said, "Your congregation know you eat with us heathens?" I said, "Yeah, but one day I'm hoping to bring you around." And I witness to them all the time. So he said something today about somebody had done something to somebody, and he said, "What would you do?" My first thought was I'd get a baseball bat, and I'd go down there, and I went. And then God says, "What are you preaching this morning?" I'm like, oh. Yeah, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. I promise I wouldn't do it. But revenge is that just, we want to do it. We want to take it in our own hands. We want to take it out on the person. It's kind of like the woman who was bitten by a rabid dog, and it looked like she was going to die from the rabies, and so the doctor told her to put her final affairs in order, and so he gave her some paper and a pen, and she's just writing down everything, writing furiously, writing as hard as she can. He leaves the room, comes back, she's still writing. He leaves again, comes back, she's still writing, and he comes in and said, "Boy, that sure is a long will that you're making." She says, "A will, nothing. I'm preparing a list of people I want to bite before I die." That's the problem with revenge, isn't it? I love that Ephesians 4:32 tells us, "Be kind and compassionate to the one another, forgiving each other, just as Christ, God, forgave you." Why do you do that? Why do you put things in there that wear me out? I have to forgive them. Forgiveness to me is an act of faith. It says God's able to take care of it. fact, Philip Yancey wrote in his book, What's So Amazing About Grace? He said, at last I understood. In the final analysis, forgiveness is an act of faith. By forgiving another, I am trusting God is a better justice maker than I am. By forgiving, I release my own right to get even and leave all the issues of fairness to God to work out. I believe in God's hands, the scales that must balance justice and mercy. I agree with him. He'll do a better job. He'll right the wrong. He'll take care of it. But our part of that is to forgive and to forget. Pastor, I got this forgiving thing down pretty good, but this forgetting thing is tough, and it is. A long time after I sort of got through and got healed of my anger and hatred, my anger and hatred had gone way past anything normal. My life was a wreck. I was making everybody around me miserable because I was miserable. When I finally was able to forgive the people who had done me wrong, I started to heal. But I would find, even after some years, in the quiet recesses of my mind, it's like the devil would whisper, hey, you remember what they did to you? And they'd try to flare up again. You'd have to take control of it. I'm not going there. I'm not living in that prison cell anymore. I believe God has both forgiven me and forgiven them if they've requested it. I'm not going to hold it. I don't know who's here that may need this. I don't know. Maybe I just imagined it. But 2 Sundays in a row now, God has had me to kind of speak on the same subject. And if you're here today, and that has been your problem, your past, what somebody's done to you, you could be 50 years old, 60 years old, and it still be holding you bound in a prison of unforgiveness. And God wants to heal you this morning. This is not about revenge. It's not about a sad, so long, sorry, luck story. It's about your healing. It's about God getting out of you the bitterness and anger that's keeping you from being healed today. When I say that, I know what that's like. And I realize that some of you right now, you may not even know it. You don't know why you're angry. I would be so angry, and I wouldn't even know why I was angry. You may be that way today, and God's trying to bring healing to you. So I want you to bow your heads this morning. May not be a person in this place. We had some men come down this morning that absolutely I never would even thought about, that just wanted help. And if you're in this place today and you've got bitterness and anger and hatred, unforgiveness maybe in your heart towards somebody who has done something in your life, you've hurt somebody, you want God to forgive you, maybe this would be a time for you. You could just slip down to this altar. We're going to have prayer for you. Simple prayer. I have no healing virtue by anything I do, but Jesus does. He can bring healing to you. And you might think, Pastor, I've been there before and I really tried to get this out of me, but I can't. Give God another chance to get that out of you today so you don't have to live with it any longer. So if you're in this place today, without any fancy fare, just step out from where you're at to this altar. I want to have prayer with you. Thank you. There are others coming. Thank you. Others are coming. Thank you. I want you to just come, stand close to the front because I want to move people in behind you. So I want them to be able to identify that you're up here for prayer this morning. Man, can't believe this many people's coming. This is awesome. I just got this feeling you're going to leave free. God has this sermon prepared for you to free you from abuse, from anger, from bitterness, from hatred. Scores of things this morning. God's got this sermon and last Sunday's sermon